President Zelensky was actually appearing on Fox News with Bret Baier, and Bret Baier actually asked him about Russian accusations around quote-unquote Nazis within the Ukrainian military, and I think his response is worth us talking a little bit about. Let's take a listen.
I want to have you clear something up for us, and this is these reports about the Azov Battalion that is said to be Nazi-affiliated organization operating as a militia in your country, said to be committing their own atrocities. What should Americans know about that unit, about those reports?
So Azov was one of those many battalions. They are what they are. They were defending our country. And later, I want to explain to you. Everything from all the components of those volunteer battalions later were incorporated into the military of Ukraine. Those Azov fighters are no longer self-established group. They are a component of the Ukrainian military. Back in 2014, there were situations when our volunteers were encircled, and some of them did violate laws of Ukraine. And they actually were taken to court and got prison sentences. So law is above all.
Yeah, this is a tough response there from Zelensky. Part of the issue, obviously, is that the Russians have been trying to paint the entire Ukrainian military as neo-Nazis. That is ludicrous. President Zelensky himself is a Jewish man. However, it is certainly true that a very small part of the Ukrainian military is neo-Nazi, and people need to be honest about that, about what exactly they believe, about some of the weapons and the training and the celebration that the mainstream media has had of this. And part of the reason why I do think it is useful for Bret Baier to ask the question, and I think for US-based commentators like us to discuss it, is you should not want to let the Russians have this if one element of their propaganda, which is true, which is that it should be confronted. And we should also be honest about the exact composition of the force who we are supporting. It does not diminish a just Ukrainian cause. It does not even diminish what's happening. But we have to be honest here that, Zelensky did ban some opposition parties, and that the Azov Battalion and some of these neo-Nazis, while yes, a small percentage, were being legitimately incorporated into the defense of Ukraine, which sadly I do think validates some bad faith Russian propaganda.
There's this instinct in the American press typically, and I appreciate Bret Baier asking this question.
Yeah, I think he did it well.
I think it's important because there's this instinct in the American press always to just ignore anything that's a little bit uncomfortable. Right. And I don't think it serves their aims, because then, if you're Russia and you want to paint the entire Ukrainian military as Nazi, or it's a country, just loaded up with Nazi sentiment everywhere, which is not at all the case. In fact, these ultra fringe right-wing parties perform very poorly when they actually, are on the ballot and voters have a chance to choose what they want in the direction that they want to see for their country. So the whole thing is farcical from the Russian perspective, the way they're trying to portray it. However, when you just try to ignore it and just try to bury it, you actually strengthen their hand, because then they say, look, you're not even willing to talk about this. Right. Look, we caught you putting Nazis training grandmas on TV and not even mentioning. Look, CNN, you're putting this Nazi battalion commander on television and acting like he's some great hero. So you're not actually helping the Ukrainian cause by burying this type of information. And it's interesting, Zelensky's answer here. First of all, he doesn't deny it. He's like, they are what they are, which is hardly comforting, especially when you know the U.S. history of how it goes when we arm radical militants. And then once the war is over and you've got these young men who are armed and equipped and itching for some sort of conflict, what happens next? That's the question. It's also something that's really relevant when we're considering what type of weapons we're ultimately shipping into Ukraine. So that part of his response is really interesting. Well, they are what they are. But the other part, I think he thinks that saying that they are now, which is true, incorporated into the Ukrainian army is somehow we're going to ease our minds. Yeah. When actually you're no, that's not. That doesn't really make us feel a lot better that they're officially part of the Ukrainian military now. And just so people know, look, the accusations of neo-Nazism with the Azov Battalion are very well-founded. And before this war, there was a lot of writing, not a lot, but there was some writing in the liberal press about
New York
this
Times,
as well.
elsewhere, yeah.
And Azov was also trying to recruit foreign neo-Nazi sympathizers from the US and from Brazil and from other places around the world to come to Ukraine. And they see this as like, you know, the potential sort of homeland of the white people. Their founding member, this is sort of the most famous quote, their founding member famously said in 2010 that the historic mission of Ukraine was to, quote, lead the white races of the world in a final crusade for their survival. And in case that wasn't clear enough, a crusade against the Jew-led Untermenschen. So that's the history of Azov Battalion. And to try to sweep that under the rug, pretend it doesn't exist, doesn't help your cause when you can just point out that they perform very poorly, that the sentiment, yes, of course there are fringe members of society there, as there are here, who hold extremist views. And by the way, you might put some pressure on the Ukrainians to not arm and supply these extremist factions within their own military. The bottom line is here, it just is helpful to be honest about the situation, and you are not effectively fighting Russian propaganda when you are completely trying to ignore the reality of what's going on
Yeah,
there.
that's right. I think parsing what is true, what is false, what is exaggerated and all that is a direct service to the public who need to make a decision for themselves. We've all seen this movie before, and this is part of the issue. When the United States was arming the Mujahideen in Afghanistan, there was no discussion around, and obviously, look, I think some of the Mujahideen cause against the Soviets was incredibly just. One of the people, though, that we were doing direct deals with and giving a lot of money to was Gulbuddin Hekmatyar, who was one of the most vicious Islamic extremist militias who in some ways was allied with the Taliban and was, let's just say, sympathetic to Osama bin Laden.
Yeah, and without getting into all of the history of this, we basically outsourced our choice of who to fund and arm to the Pakistanis.
Yeah, to ISI.
And they went with, and we affirmatively liked the fact that they went with the most ruthless, brutal, unscrupulous killers.
Great when you're fighting the Soviets.
Right.
Not great when you're against us.
Because there were other anti-Soviet groups that were more moderate and more tolerant in their views that we could have gone with instead, but we liked the fact that they were killers and they were completely unscrupulous and and barbaric and willing to do absolutely anything. And that ends up, not working out well for the world, for Afghanistan, or for ourselves.
Same thing happened in Syria, Jabhat al-Nusra, which is with al-Qaeda. Yeah, they happen to be enemies of ISIS. They're also al-Qaeda. They ended up having some people, or at least some weapons or whatever made their way over into those hands. Same thing happened in Libya. We watched with Libyan rebels, Libyan democracy, obviously a just cause. Gaddafi's weapons start flowing. Chris, I'm forgetting his name, our ambassador, who died, was there in order to facilitate some interesting stuff. This is not a blame America first. I'm just saying that these actions have consequences.
We never learned the lessons, that's what we're saying.
Right, and having an honest discussion at the time before you do the policy can save you a lot of headache many, many years to come. And that's why in the moment, it's important to try and be clear-eyed. That's all we're saying. I know that this segment will still be, used by bad faith actors and all the others, but I think it's important that our audience out there is trying to make up their minds for themselves, can hold many different things in their head all at once. And I trust people to have enough honesty with themselves to be able to parse the situation, regardless of even our own thoughts on this. Yes. So that's what you need.
Cable news is ripping us apart, dividing the country, making it impossible to function as a society, and making it impossible to know just what is true and what is false. But the good news is they are failing and they know it.
That is why we're building something new, a new mainstream, a healthier one, something more trustworthy, something that we are going to need in one of the most pivotal times in American history. We are building up here for the midterms, for the upcoming presidential election, but we need your help. So if you can help us out by becoming a premium member today at breakingpoints.com, we're trying to change America for the better and the entire world.
So what are you waiting for, guys? Go to breakingpoints.com and sign up and help us build a new mainstream.